Awesome. I wanted to start by just talking about vacations because I know we both probably need one. But that may have to wait because I don't think we'll talk. Well, we may talk about RubbrDuck for 40 minutes. But that's what we're going to talk about next. I just had to stop my recording and my laptop was like winding up a bit. I need a new laptop, man.
This is your tools, right? You got to have the sharp tools.
Yeah.
You got to keep them sharp.
Yeah. It's probably time. So, Ray, I might have to say congratulations.
I'm not really sure what that's for.
You have officially now built what will probably be Anvil's first product. Not even probably. I mean, we're likely by the time this podcast drops, it will have gone live. RubbrDuck has been a very focused endeavor for you. I would say focused probably for the last 4 months since we started recording podcast episodes, maybe a little bit before that, to really get it out. We've now had, you and I have had 2 successful calls on the platform. We're not on the platform right now, of course, but we could be. There's not really anything that says we couldn't be. And so, yeah, it seems like it's going to be a great success. We're really excited to put it out and learn about it. And so I wanted to say congratulations, but I also wanted to just give you an opportunity to tell me and our robust listener audience what is RubbrDuck, but not even just what is RubbrDuck, but also what led you down this road. Like, why is RubbrDuck a thing that we're building out, that we're driving forward as a co-op, and yeah, tell us about it.
I know you love to give me all the credit, but that's not true because if you remember back over a year ago, we were on a call, and I needed help, if I remember correctly. I needed help with something. And I said, hey, Randy, would you join me on a call to help me walk through something? And correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, because my memory as I get older tends to not be so great. But, I start chatting away at my problem. And then ultimately, the light bulb goes off and it says, oh, that's the problem, right? That's the thing that's blocking me. And it goes back to this old idea of RubbrDuck debugging, which is you state your problem, you talk to, at times it was an actual rubber duck, like you would have in a bathtub for kids, but it can also be a human. It can be anything, right? If you collect like bobbleheads, you could talk to your bobblehead. But it's the idea that you speak out loud your problem, and ultimately, or sometimes you end up stumbling upon the solution because you communicate in a way that you weren't keeping it just inside and kind of like getting tunnel vision. So again, we were on a conversation and it came about. We said, hey, this is what we should build.
Yeah.
Now, we've always wanted to build stuff. And it's not like RubbrDuck is the first thing, but it's the first thing that is going to be under this umbrella, right? That we're going to call Anvil as a team that we're building together. So I know you've built a lot of stuff in the past, but that's what makes it so exciting, is that we've built this and we're going to launch this together. That's what makes it so exciting. Yeah. And so this is basically just a digital version of that whole RubbrDuck debugging practice. It reminds me very much of this. If you remember back, like Craigslist a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, is Craigslist a couple of years ago now? Like, I feel like, does it still exist? I haven't been on Craigslist.
See, that's the question. That's the question. Does it still exist? But here's where I'm going with that. If you remember Craigslist, right, you'd go on there, you're looking for something. It's kind of like an online yard sale.
Yeah.
Right. And you find stuff. And then here comes along like companies like OfferUp and Let Go. I don't know if you remember them. A couple of years ago, they had a bunch of commercials and stuff. They basically evolved Craigslist, right? They took Craigslist and they were like, let's do it better.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they did. And RubbrDuck is very much that for me, or for us. It's that whole concept in a digital version. But here's the real value. Usually when we're doing this RubbrDuck debugging, a lot of times you're limited to your network, to the network that you've built. So in my case, I said, hey, I need help with Docker, because Randy's a Docker expert. And if anybody who's listening to this didn't know that Randy's a Docker expert, he basically is. So
I don't know that I would say expert, but I can break a thing. Yeah,
exactly. You break it till it works, right?
Yeah.
And so if I need help with Docker, I have to go and say, hey, Randy, can you help me solve my doctor problem? Can you help explain this to me? Because he's in my network.
Mm-hmm.
I can go on Udemy and find a Docker course, but in that course, it's already been recorded. It's static.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I can't, it's difficult for me to reach out to that person because that person may not get back to me. And I could go on LinkedIn and I could say, hey, who knows this? Or I could go watch a ton of YouTube videos, but they may not answer my problem because they don't know my specific scenario. They don't know
Right.
my setup.
Right.
And so that's what RubbrDuck is going to help solve, or at least that's what we hope it solves, is that now I can go on the platform and choose a topic, Docker, and I can add in some optional text and say, hey, my Docker container won't stop, right? Or it won't start. And I can request a duck. And as
Yeah.
long as there's one available, the platform is going to match me with someone who hopefully at this point has been vetted, but in the very beginning, there's going to be some testing. There's going to be some bugs. Whoever's listening to this,
Mm.
there's going to be some bugs. There's bugs in every single piece of software on the internet, whether you see it or not. But we're asking people to help us test it and make it better. So
Yeah.
I need help with Docker. I go on the platform. I request help. Now my network has greatly expanded because now it's the platform that's going to put me in touch or matchmake me with someone else that can help solve my Docker problem. And so now I can share my screen. I can talk through the problem. I might even talk through the problem and then realize I solved it myself, just like as if I was talking to a RubbrDuck.
Yeah.
But here's the real benefit. Now that person on the other end, like Randy, can ask one or two questions that could lead me in the right direction. It's not that I want to get on this call with Randy or with a duck so that way they can tell me what I did wrong, but so that way they can help coach me in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's the real benefit, is that it helps facilitate learning.
Yeah. I like it. I love it. And that's why I mean, when you first proposed that we build it, of course, we've owned the domain for, like you said, a little over a year now. I was like, yeah, there is something to this, because there's an opportunity there for, what I tend to call, well, I think what every teacher tends to call like teachable moments, where you can just, when you see where somebody is struggling with something, you create teachability out of that moment. And so I think there's a lot of value there instead of waiting. Yeah. So it's a great platform. I want to ask you a couple of questions about it. Of course, you and I in the past have written several interviews together, so I'm going to go through some of the questions that we've talked about there in the past, and just maybe start by saying, like, what was the hardest part about putting it all together
The
for
hardest
you,
part about putting
besides waiting on me to build platform?
Yeah, I really want to say that the hardest part is committing.
Mm,
I mentioned this on one of the articles that I posted not too long ago, was that ideas are just ideas. They're not unique. I guarantee you that other people have had the idea for a digital version of RubbrDuck. Guarantee it.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
it's nothing until you execute,
yeah,
right? Until you commit. And so I went back and I looked at our repo. If you look at like Git Lens or Git Blame, right, you can look at the history. We set up the initial version of RubbrDuck, like the initial repo, like, I don't know, 14, 16 months ago.
yeah,
It's we were both at Stored
yep,
and we decided on this idea, and we've talked about this. It basically came to life in the last 4 months is what happened.
mm-hmm,
But we decided on the idea like 14 to 16 months ago. And the only reason that kept it from, coming to fruition, right, or coming to life, is commitment.
yeah,
So that is absolutely the hardest part. So if anybody's ever saying, do I build this thing? I have this idea. Maybe somebody else has this idea, and they're so worried about, oh, well, somebody else is going to beat me to the market. Somebody else already has this idea. Why would I build it? Just build it. I
yeah,
guarantee you that somebody else already has your idea. Maybe they're building it, and maybe they're going to stop at 50% because they've lost, the will to go on, right? The will to see it
yeah.
through.
The
So
steam, they lost their
the
steam.
steam, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So that, I mean, given all of that, given that the hardest thing was commitment, which I absolutely agree with you on, because like as soon as we kind of, I mean, and I sort of remember even at the start of this podcast, we were like, you know what, we're just going to do it. And that's kind of what we've been doing ever since. And that's the same way I went with RubbrDuck and with Anvil in general, is we're just going to do this thing. And now it's kind of, I mean, full steam ahead, and we've got a lot of other interesting things lined up in the pipeline, and it just gets easier and easier. So exercising that muscle. So given that, getting on the track for the first time and taking that first run is the hardest part. Like if you were to rewind to Randy and Ram talking about RubbrDuck 14, 16 months ago, what would you tell them differently?
That's a great question I hadn't even thought about before. Um, I'd probably just encourage them to build it. There's a whole set of lessons learned here, not just from RubbrDuck, but from everything that we're doing with Anvil. And then some of the other, we can mention Propeller because
Yeah.
nobody knows about it yet. And then there's
Oh, my brother
lots.
knows about it. He listens to the podcast. He's no
Yeah.
doubt because
So
Propeller's old.
yeah, exactly. Right. So that's a great point, right? So Propeller is an idea, and it's something that you've had in some instance or in some form in the past, right? And we're gonna bring it under the Anvil umbrella, even if it was before, but in a different form. And so I'd go back and say, just build the things, because then the next things continue to become easier. Um, I know there's times when I was debating whether we build this or not, like which we and both of us together we're going back and forth on what is priority. Because when you
Yeah.
have a backlog and you're only two people, you only have a certain amount of time that you can dedicate to these projects. So you kind of have to say, hey, we're both going to work on this, or you're going to work on this, and I'm going to work on that. And I think aside from everything else, if RubbrDuck falls flat on its face, there's so much value that came out of it. All this infrastructure that you've built, all the foundation that is going to facilitate quicker projects and more robust projects going forward, ones that are built on a solid foundation. That's the value that comes out of it. So yeah, absolutely. I'd say go back and just build the thing because of all the other things that are going to come out of it. Because one of the questions that we always ask ourselves is, if I spend all the time on this thing, is it going to have some type of return on investment?
Yeah.
And from what RubbrDuck looks like in its current form, there's no path to profitability in the
Right.
short term.
Right.
But that's not always, that shouldn't always be the primary driving factor. It's more of, giving back to the community. I think you've talked about open source for a long time, right? Not to say that RubbrDuck is open source, but I know you have a huge passion and commitment to the open source community. Some of the stuff that you're building is going to be open sourced under
Mm-hmm.
Anvil, under the Anvil namespace. But absolutely is that you have to build it. You kind of have to just see if people use it, right? Validate your idea. And it's funny. Like, I think we validated RubbrDuck just between me and you.
Well, I think so. That's what I was going to say, is that like there's so much there, and like I definitely think the ROI on RubbrDuck is apparent to me now, like in lots of ways. One, all of the infrastructure that we have stood up that's allowing us to like, I mean, we mentioned Propeller, but we have, a couple of other apps that we're also, starting to get the foundations in place for, and it's just getting easier and easier, and that wouldn't have happened without RubbrDuck. The other thing about RubbrDuck is huge amounts of learning there and how we work together best, especially in this asynchronous flow that you and I have been talking about for the last few weeks. Like in figuring that out and figuring out what's missing, what are the missing pieces to be able to enable that. One of which was, a backlog, which is what brought Propeller back on the table as a more robust application. And then the other thing that I think about, though, is that we have had two successful calls on RubbrDuck, and they were trial calls, but then they immediately started to spawn out like other things that we could be using RubbrDuck for. Like anybody that's listened to this podcast for a little while knows that scheduling these calls is a constant struggle for us because our schedules don't super align. Which is totally fine. And I know that you mention it pretty readily on LinkedIn, that I stay pretty busy. And that's true. I have two small kids, and that is the priority. But I think about the fact that now we own RubbrDuck, right? Like we own this entire platform. And then we can extend it to meet our needs if scheduling is a problem. Like, and you've already built in this great functionality to RubbrDuck to set up my availability on RubbrDuck, right? And so now there's an easy means for us to just extend that behavior a little bit to schedule the calls ahead of time in RubbrDuck by just finding alignment of our availability. And that's a really powerful tool to take it, and you mentioned like vet it and see if it's going to add value, but knowing that it is already capable of adding value in mine and your flow, and we own it from top to bottom, so we can add the additional pieces that continue to add value in our flow, so that even if it doesn't get broad-based consumption, it's something that's providing value for us. And yeah, I think there's lots of value there.
You just said something that, again, I can say that RubberDuck has immediate value in scheduling. If your network is unavailable, again, I have a Docker issue
Mm-hmm.
and it's a complicated one, and Randy's busy and he's the only Docker expert that I know, then I'm stuck waiting until Randy frees up.
Mm-hmm.
But RubberDuck says as we grow our network of ducks, right, of people, those people that are on Stack Overflow anyway, and
Yeah.
they're there looking to answer problems. As we grow the network of ducks, now you don't have to wait half a day or even potentially an hour to
Right.
get help with the thing that you're stuck on. And we know that we can be stuck on things for weeks. I personally have been stuck on a single problem for like 2 to 3 weeks. And if I could simply say, hey, I've been stuck on this for 2 or 3 weeks, I can't be stuck on this a second longer.
Yeah.
Now I can reach out for help. I don't have to wait or depend on my known network. Now I can leverage the platform.
Yeah, exactly. You can, it's a little like Uber for help, right? Like you can just say, I need help now, and see if there's a duck with your expertise that can help you. And so if folks wanted to go and check out RubbrDuck in its current state, where would they go?
Yeah, I love it. Go to rubberduck.app. That's rubber without the E. So RUBBRDUCK.app. The live version, the working version, isn't in production yet. If for some reason we get there
Yeah,
and we're
we
still not in
should.
production, I encourage everyone to sign up, to at least subscribe, drop your email, and as soon as we go live, we're going to notify everybody on that email list. And so the hope is that by the time you hear this, rubberduck.app is going to be live and we're going to be testing it. Here's the second part I want to say about that. If you're helping us test it, please leave feedback, because
Yeah,
it's going to help us to get better and grow. And
feedback
I'll
is a
be on.
gift.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. You said that before. Feedback is a gift, and that's absolutely right. Whether it's good feedback or, feedback that might hurt us a little bit on our conscience, maybe we need to pivot a little bit on what RubberDuck actually is and provides. But that's okay if we need to pivot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's why we need feedback, is to know. Otherwise, we're continuing to build out a thing that nobody needs or wants. And we can drop the link in show notes as well. But I did want to give that opportunity to put that out there.
And here's one other thing that I want to say to anybody who's thinking about building something. Build it, and even if you have one person using it, support that one person.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go live with RubberDuck, and we've already had quite a few people sign up for to be notified.
That's news to me, so that's awesome.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we've already had quite a few people sign up to be notified of it. But even in the event that we only have 2 people using this thing on a daily basis, we're going to support them,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
Because those are users, and it doesn't matter. And I say this from experience because before I had my first paid gig, I was building iOS apps, and one of them had a couple of users that gave feedback, and I ignored it. I didn't treat it as a business, but this is something that Randy, helped me to understand in the last couple months, and that's building failed startups, or build failed startups, as opposed to side projects. And in the past, I was building simply side projects or projects for my portfolio. Today, everything that we build is going to be treated as potentially a failed startup. Hopefully RubberDuck doesn't fail, but it doesn't matter if it only has 2 users on it on the daily basis. We're going to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ram, one place that maybe we can wrap this is, I want to ask, you talked about failed startup in there, and like, what does success look like? What do you like? What do we count as success? 2 users using the platform every day or on any basis sounds like success to me. What's success for RubberDuck for you?
Yeah. I'm going to call back to one of the things before I come back to RubberDuck. Okay. So
Okay.
I released like 4 apps on the App Store. They're no longer there, so don't go look for them. And they weren't great in the beginning. But here's how I measured the success back then. Again, I made $0. When I could look on the analytics for those apps, I saw people download the app all across the world. It didn't matter that they only used it for a day and deleted the app. I had people from all over the world downloading my app, and that made it successful to me. So if we fast forward to RubbrDuck, and again, we may have different versions of success here,
Right,
or
right.
different ways to quantify that. But to me, it's already successful because
I
I've
love it.
learned so much.
I love it.
I've never worked with Socket.io before. I feel like I'm pretty good at Socket.io today. You introduced Chakra to me before. Now, like, I'm pretty strong and I can build anything out really fast with Chakra. TypeScript, it's built in TypeScript, so my TypeScript got even better. And so even if, people don't adopt the platform, it's successful in my mind, along with all the other infrastructure that got built because of it.
Awesome. Yeah, totally love that answer. Love that answer. Totally agree. Lots of learnings have come out of this, and yeah, it's just those learnings are just going to snowball forward. So really excited about seeing where this goes, both as a product launch for us, and also just as a how it enhances what we do. I think my last note is, uh, everybody always sort of talks about like you build the team first and then you decide the product, and I feel like we've done that here so far, and we'll continue to. And so yeah, it's cool to have this going out there in the world.
It's exciting and it's nerve-wracking. You build something, right? You put all your blood and your sweat and your tears into it. And as a team, this person's doing this person's doing that. Finally, it gets to a point to where it gets to the end. And this is a topic for another day, so I'm gonna leave it with this. There's the idea of being afraid of success,
Mm-hmm.
right? Afraid of what happens next. We could simply say, oh man, what if people use it? Now we gotta, spend a lot of time on this. And we could just leave it here in its current state forever and it'll die in GitHub. We have GitHub and GitLab stuff, but
Yeah.
it'll just be die and there'll be cobwebs on it. And somebody could build something similar to it. If people don't use it, who cares, right? We move on. But if people start to use it, um, there's that fear of the unknown. I've never built something like this. I've never.
Well, that's the fun part is for sure figuring out support models and stuff like that. But we'll definitely cross that bridge when we get there. Um, awesome. Well, Ram, as you know, I have to run to a meeting, but it's been great chatting with you this morning. I am very excited about what we've done here with RubbrDuck. And again, just want to say congratulations on getting it together, because I know Ram was being very, for our listeners, deferential at the beginning of the call, but if you look at the Get Blame, it speaks for itself about how much of RubbrDuck was built by Ram versus by me. And so, yeah, just congratulations again, and we'll see how it goes. I'm excited for this podcast to drop and to see the feedback that we get, because I do think I'm gonna wax philosophic or whatever just a moment, that like the worst response isn't nobody using it, and it's not everybody using it. It's silence in terms of feedback. The worst response is silence in terms of feedback, because that's how we learn. That feedback loop is so important. So if you're listening to this, go sign up, leave us some feedback, try a session just for fun. Again, it's not going to be a flawless experience. If it is, we'll be just as surprised as you are, and we are here to learn for sure.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Randy.
All right, thanks, man.